สวัสดีจ้าสวัสดีทุกคนนะคะยินดีต้อนรับเข้าสู่สตรีมของ CallistoSoCool ในวันนี้นะคะวันนี้เนี่ยเราก็กลับมากับการอ่านนิยายแฮร์รี่พอตเตอร์กันต่อนะฮะหลังจากที่ก่อนหน้านี้เนี่ยเราอ่านแฮร์รี่พอตเตอร์ภาคที่1จบไปแล้วนะคะเราก็จะมาอ่านภาคที่2กันต่อนะคะสักครู่นะสวัสดีคุณม่อนสวัสดีคุณพรีเมียมนะคะยินดีต้อนรับเข้าสู่สตรีมของCallistoSoCoolในวันนี้นะ เสียงทุกคนรู้สึกที่ทุกคนว่าเสียงเราดังปกติไหมหรือว่าเบากว่าปกติเพราะว่าเราปรับตำแหน่งไมค์เรานะ เราไม่จับหน้าฉันละโอเค นะก็แพทเทิร์นรายการนะครับเราก็จะใช้เหมือนเดิมเลยก็คือเราจะอ่าน3 chapter นะในตอนจบ chapter นึงเนี่ยเราก็จะแปลความแล้วก็จะสรุปเนื้อเรื่องแล้วก็เหตุการณ์ที่เกิดขึ้นใน chapter นั้นๆนะคะเนื่องจากว่านิยายเป็นภาษาอังกฤษเนาะโอเคขออนุญาตเคลียร์สถานที่แป๊บนึงนะเบาใช่ไหมโอเคเพราะว่าฉันลองปรับตำแหน่งไมค์ใหม่ดูเพราะว่าเผื่อมันจะช่วยในการประเด็นไมค์ช็อตฉันได้บ้างนิดนึงนะก็เลยแบบว่าต้องอันนี้แล้วคือบวกกับว่าช่วงนี้เสียงฉันหายด้วยฉันเลยพูดดังไปได้ไงก็เลยต้องเอาได้แค่นี้พอเนาะฉันก็ต้องแบบ ถ้างั้นเดี๋ยวฉันจะหรือว่าเอาไว้แค่นี้ก็พอวะเพราะว่ามันคือแต่คือจริงๆช่วงนี้เสียงฉันมันเบาอยู่แล้วเพราะว่าฉันอย่างที่ฉันบอกไงว่าเสียงฉันมันหายก็เลยต้องอันนี้นิดนึงเซฟเสียงตัวเองหน่อยอะไรอย่างนี้นะแต่คิดว่าการปรับตำแหน่งไมค์ก็น่าจะมีส่วนอยู่แหละแต่ว่าคือฉันไม่อยากปรับเกณฑ์ให้มันเพิ่มเยอะไงเพราะว่าเดี๋ยวมันจะดังเกินไปเพราะถ้ามันดังเกินไปปุ๊บเนี่ยมันจะกลายเป็นว่าไมค์ฉันก็จะแตกอยู่มันก็จะช็อตเหมือนเดิมเสียงมันก็จะช็อตเหมือนเดิมขนาดฉันพยายามแก้ไขปัญหาแล้วโอเคแต่เดี๋ยวเราลองเพิ่มสักนิดนึงละกันนะคุณได้ยินเสียงชิปเมาส์ฉันด้วยแหละฉันลองเพิ่มกลับมาเป็นระดับปกติละอันนี้คือระดับเสียงที่ฉันเพิ่มมาปกตินะแต่ว่าเสียงฉันมันค่อนข้างที่จะเบาอยู่แล้วแหละเพราะว่าอย่างที่ฉันบอกไปว่าฉันปรับฉันปรับตำแหน่งไมค์อีกรอบนึงทำให้ไมค์มันอยู่ห่างจากปากฉันเล็กน้อยแล้วก็ช่วงนี้เสียงฉันค่อนข้างที่จะหายฉันเลยพูดดังไม่ได้ประมาณนั้นนะโอเคเราก็ไม่เสียเวลาเนาะก็เราขอแพทเทิร์นรายการก็อย่างที่เราบอกไปตั้งแต่ที่6 EP ก่อนแล้วก็คือว่าระหว่างที่เราอ่านเนี่ยเราอาจจะไม่ได้อ่านหรือตอบคอมเมนต์บางคอมเมนต์นะเราจะอ่านคอมเมนต์ทีเดียวหลังจากที่เราอ่านชัปเตอร์นั้นจบนะเราก็จะมาค่อยอ่านทีเดียวเพื่อให้ไม่เป็นการขัดอรรถรสนะมันจะได้ไม่ขาดช่วงด้วยโอเคเนาะ ถ้าอย่างนั้นเนี่ยเรามาเริ่มกันเลยดีกว่านะคะก็แฮร์รี่พอตเตอร์ภาคที่2ของเราที่3ก็คือ Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets หรือ Harry Potter กับห้องแห่งความลับนั่นเองนะคะเป็นภาคที่2หลังจากที่เราอ่านภาคแรกจบไปแล้วเนาะเมื่อวิก่อนนู้นนะฮะโอเคเรามาเริ่มซึ่งก่อนที่จะเริ่มเนี่ยหนังสือภาคที่2เนี่ยจะมีทั้งหมด18 chapter ด้วยกันนะคะก็คือสามารถแบ่งเป็นถ้าเราอ่าน chapter ถ้าอ่านครั้งละ3 chapter แล้วก็จะใช้ประมาณ6 ตอนนะคะ ก็ถือว่าแบ่งสวยดีนะโอเคถ้าอย่างนั้นเรามาเริ่มที่ chapter ที่1กันดีกว่านะคะก็ chapter ที่1เนี่ยจะมีชื่อว่า The Worst Birthday นะคะทำไมมันไม่จับหน้าฉันเลยวะเฮ้ยเหมือนกล้องฉันเล่นตลกปะเนี่ยช่างมันนะก็ The Worst Birthday นะคะก็คือวันเกิดที่เลวร้ายที่สุดนะคะโอเคถ้าอย่างนั้นเนี่ยเราก็มาเริ่มกันเลยดีกว่านะฮะคือถ้าฉันไอเยอะอะไรหรือว่าพอสเยอะก็ขออภัยด้วยเพราะว่าเสียงฉันไม่ไหวแล้วไม่แล้วคือเสียงฉันไม่มีฉันจึงมาอ่านย่ายช่างมันเราถือว่าเราต้องทำหน้าที่ของเรานะถ้างั้นเรามาเริ่มกันเลยดีกว่านะคะ Chapter 1 The Worst Birthday Not for the first time An argument had broken out over breakfast at number 4 Purett Drive Mr. Vernon Dursley had been woken in the early hours of the morning by a loud hooting noise from his nephew, Harry's room. Third time this week, he roared across the table. If you can't control that owl, it'll have to go. Harry tried yet again to explain. She's bored, he said. She's used to flying around outside. If I could just let her out at night. Do I look stupid? Snarled Uncle Vernon, a bit of fried egg dangling from his bushy mustache. I know what will happen if that owl's let out. He exchanged dark looks with his wife, Petunia. Harry tried to argue back, but his words were drowned by a long, loud bleat from Dursley's son, Dudley. I want more bacon. There's more in the frying pan, sweetums, said Aunt Petunia, turning misty eyes on her massive son. We must feed you up while we've got the chance. I don't like the sound of that school food. Nonsense, Petunia. I never went hungry when I was at Smeltings, said Uncle Vernon heartily. Dudley gets enough, don't you, son? Dudley, who was so large his bottom drooped over either side of the kitchen chair, grinned and turned to Harry. Pass the frying pan. You forgot the magic word, said Harry irritably. The effect of this simple sentence on the rest of the family was incredible. Dudley gasped and fell off his chair with a crash that shook the whole kitchen. Mrs. Dursley gave a small scream and clapped her hands to her mouth. Mr. Dursley jumped to his feet, veins throbbing in his temples. I meant please, said Harry quickly. I didn't mean. What have I told you? Thundered his uncle, spraying spit over the table, about saying the M word in our house. But how dare you threaten Dudley? Roared Uncle Vernon, pounding the table with his fist. I warned you. I will not tolerate mention of your abnormality under this roof. Harry stared from his purple-faced uncle to his pale aunt, who was trying to heave Dudley to his feet. All right, said Harry, all right. Uncle Vernon sat back down, breathing like a winded rhinoceros, and watching Harry closely out of corners of his small, sharp eyes. Ever since Harry had come home for the summer holidays, Uncle Vernon had been treating him like a bomb that might go off at any moment. Because Harry wasn't a normal boy. As a matter of fact, he was as not normal as it is possible to be. Harry Potter was a wizard fresh from his first years at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and if the Dursleys were unhappy to have them back for the holidays, it was nothing to how Harry felt. He missed Hogwarts so much, it was like having a constant stomachache. He missed the castle with its secret passageways and ghosts, his lessons, though perhaps not Snape, the potions master. The post-arriving by owl, eating banquets in the Great Hall, sleeping in his four-poster bed in the Tower Dormitory, visiting the gamekeeper Hagrid in his cabin in the grounds next to the Forbidden Forest, and especially Quidditch, the most popular sport in the wizarding world. 6 tall goalposts, 4 flying balls, and 14 players on broomsticks. All Harry's spellbook, his wand, ropes, cauldrons, and top-of-the-range Nimbus 2000s and broomstick had been locked in a cupboard under the stairs by Uncle Vernon. The instant Harry had come home, what did the Dursley care if Harry lost his place in the house Quidditch team because he hadn't practiced all summer? What was it to the Dursley if Harry went back to school without any of his homework done? The Dursley were what wizards called muggles, not a drop of magical blood in their veins. And as far as they were concerned, having a wizard in the family was a matter of deepest shame. Uncle Vernon had even padlocked Harry's owl Hedwig inside her cage to stop her carrying messages to anyone in the wizarding world. Harry looked nothing like the rest of the family. Uncle Vernon was large and neckless, with an enormous black mustache. Aunt Petunia was horse-faced and bony. Dudley was blonde, pink, and porky. Harry, on the other hand, was small and skinny, with brilliant green eyes and jet black hair that was always untidy. He wore round glasses, and on his forehead was a thin, lightning-shaped scar. It was this scar that had made Harry so particularly unusual, even for a wizard. This scar was the only hint of Harry's very mysterious past, of the reason he had been left on the Dursleys' doorstep 11 years before. At the age of 1, Harry had somehow survived a curse from the greatest dark sorcerer of all time, Lord Voldemort, whose name most witches and wizards still fear to speak. Harry's parents had died in Voldemort's attack, but Harry had escaped with his lightning scar, and somehow nobody understood why. Voldemort's power had been destroyed the instant he failed to kill Harry. So Harry had been brought up by his dead mother's sister and her husband. He had spent 10 years with the Dursley, never understanding why he kept making odd things happen without meaning to, believing the Dursley stories that he had got his car in a car crash which had killed his parents. Then, exactly a year ago, Hogwarts had written to Harry, and the whole story had come out. Harry had taken up his place at a wizard school, where he and his scars were famous. But now, the school year was over, and he was back with the Dursley for the summer, back to being treated like a dog that had rolled in something smelly. The Dursley hadn't even remembered that today happened to be Harry's 12th birthday. Of course, his hopes hadn't been high. They'd never given him a proper present, let alone a cake, but to ignore it completely. At that moment, Uncle Vernon cleared his throat importantly and said, "Now, as we all know, today is a very important day." Harry looked up, hardly daring to believe it. This could well be the day I made the biggest deal of my career," said Uncle Vernon. Harry went back to his toast. Of course, he thought bitterly. Uncle Vernon was talking about the stupid dinner party. He'd been talking nothing else for a fortnight. Some rich builder and his wife were coming to dinner, and Uncle Vernon was hoping to get a huge order from him. Uncle Vernon's company made drills. "I think we should run through the schedule one more time," said Uncle Vernon, "which we should all be in position at 8 o'clock. Petunia, you will be?" "In the lounge," said Aunt Petunia promptly, waiting to welcome them graciously to her home. "Good, good. And Dudley?" "I'll be waiting to open the door." Dudley put on a foul, simpering smile. "May I take your coats, Mr. and Mrs. Mason?" "They'll love him," cried Aunt Petunia rapturously. "Excellent, Dudley," said Uncle Vernon. Then he rounded on Harry. "And you?" "I'll be in my bedroom, making no noise and pretending I'm not there," said Harry tonelessly. "Exactly," said Uncle Vernon nasally. "I will lead them into the lounge, introduce you, Petunia, and pour them drinks. At 8:15, I'll announce dinner," said Aunt Petunia. "And Dudley, you'll say, 'May I take you through the dining room, Mrs. Mason?'" said Dudley, offering his fat arm to an invisible woman. "My perfect little gentleman," sniffed Aunt Petunia. "And you?" said Uncle Vernon viciously to Harry. "I'll be in my room, making no noise and pretending I'm not there," said Harry dully. "Precisely. Now, we should aim to get in a few good compliments at dinner. Petunia, any ideas?" "Vernon tells me you're a wonderful golfer, Mr. Mason. Do tell me where you bought your dress, Mrs. Mason." "Perfect. Dudley?" "How about, we had to write an essay about our hero at school, Mr. Mason, and I wrote about you." This was too much for both Aunt Petunia and Harry. Aunt Petunia burst into tears and hugged her son, while Harry ducked under the table so they wouldn't see him laughing. "And you, boy?" Harry fought to keep his face straight as he emerged. "I'll be in my room, making no noise, and pretend I'm not there," he said. "Too right you will," said Uncle Vernon forcefully. "The Masons don't know anything about you, and it's going to stay that way. When dinner's over, you take Mrs. Mason back to the lounge for coffee, Petunia, and I'll bring the subject round to drills. With any luck, I'll have the deal signed and sealed before the news at 10. We'll be shopping for a holiday home in Majorca this time tomorrow." Harry couldn't feel too excited about this. He didn't think the Dursley would like him any better in Majorca than they did in Privet Drive. "Right. And I'm off to town to pick up the dinner jackets for Dudley and me. And you," he snarled at Harry, "you stay out of your aunt's way while she's clearing." Harry left through the back door. It was a brilliant sunny day. He crossed the lawn, slumped down the garden bench, and sang under his breath, "Happy birthday to me, happy birthday to me." No cards, no presents, and he would be spending the evening pretending not to exist. He gazed miserably into the hedge. He had never felt so lonely, more than anything else at Hogwarts, more even than playing Quidditch. Harry missed his best friends, Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger. They, however, didn't seem to be missing him at all. Neither of them had written to him all summer. even though Ron said he was going to ask Harry to come and stay. Countless times, Harry had been on the point of unlocking Hedwig's cage by magic and sending her to Ron and Hermione with a letter, but it wasn't worth the risk. Underage wizards weren't allowed to use magic outside school. Harry hadn't told the Dursley this. He knew it was only their terror that he might turn them into all dung beetles that stopped them locking him in the cupboard under the stairs with his wands and broomstick. For the first couple of weeks back, Harry had enjoyed murmuring nonsense words under his breath and watching Dudley tearing out the room as far as his fat leg would carry him. But the long silence from Ron and Hermione had made Harry feel so cut off from the magical world that even taunting Dudley had lost its appeal, and now Ron and Hermione had forgotten his birthday. What wouldn't he give now for a message from Hogwarts, from any witch or wizard? He'd almost be glad of a sight of an arch enemy, Draco Malfoy, just to be sure he hadn't been a dream. Not that his whole story and whole year at Hogwarts had been fun. On the very end of the last term, Harry had come face to face with none other than Lord Voldemort himself. Voldemort might be a ruin of his former self, but he was still terrifying, still cunning. Still determined to regain power, Harry had slipped through Voldemort's clutches for a second time, but it had been a narrow escape. And even now, weeks later, Harry kept waking up in the night, drenched in cold sweat, wondering where Voldemort was now, remembering his livid face, his wide, mad eyes. Harry suddenly sat bolt upright on the garden bench. He had been staring absent-mindedly onto the hedge, and the hedge was staring back. Two enormous green eyes had appeared among the leaves. Harry jumped to his feet just as a jeering voice floated across the lawn. "I know what day it is," sang Dudley, waddling towards him. The huge eyes blinked and vanished. "What?" said Harry, not taking his eyes off the spot where they had been. I know what day it is," Dudley repeated, coming right up to him. "Well done," said Harry. "So you finally learned the days of the week?" "Today's your birthday," sneered Dudley. "How come you haven't got any cards? Haven't you got your friends at that freak place?" "Better not let your mom hear you talking about my school," said Harry coolly. Dudley hitched up his trousers, which were slipping down his fat bottom. "Why are you staring at the hedge?" he said suspiciously. "I'm trying to decide what would be the best spell to set it on fire," said Harry. Dudley stumbled backward at once, a look of panic on his face. "You can't. Dad told you're not supposed to do magic. He said he'll chuck you out of the house, and you haven't got anywhere else to go. You haven't got any friends to take you." "Jiggery pokery," said Harry in a fierce voice. "Hocus pocus, swiggly wiggly." "Mom!" howled Dudley, tripping over his feet as he dashed back towards the house. "Mom, he's doing you know what." Harry paid dearly for this moment of fun, as neither Dudley nor the hedge was in any way hurt. Aunt Petunia knew he hadn't really done magic, but he still had to duck as she aimed a heavy blow at his head with a soapy frying pan. Then she gave him work to do, with the promise he wouldn't eat again until he finished. While Dudley lolled around watching and eating ice creams, Harry cleaned the windows, washed the car, mowed the lawn, trimmed the flower beds, pruned and watered the roses, and repainted the garden bench. The sun blazed overhead, burning the back of his neck. Harry knew he shouldn't have risen to Dudley's bait, but Dudley had said the very thing had been thinking himself. Maybe he didn't have any friends at Hogwarts. Wish they could see famous Harry Potter now, he thought savagely, as he sprayed manure on the flower beds, his back aching, sweating running down his face. It was 7:30 in the evening when, at last, exhausted, he heard Aunt Petunia calling him. "Get in here and walk on the newspaper." Harry moved gladly into the shade of the gleaming kitchen. On top of the fridge stood tonight's pudding, a huge mound of whipped cream and sugared violets. A joint of roast pork was sizzling in the oven. "Eat quickly, the Masons will be here soon," snapped Aunt Petunia, pointing to 2 slices of bread and a lump of cheese on the kitchen table. She was already wearing a salmon pink cocktail dress. Harry washed his hands and bolted down his pitiful supper. The moment he had finished, Aunt Petunia whisked away his plate. "Upstairs, hurry!" As he passed the door to the living room, Harry caught a glimpse of Uncle Vernon and Dudley in bow ties and dinner jackets. He had only just reached the upstairs landing when the doorbell rang and Uncle Vernon's face appeared at the foot of the stairs. Remember, boy, one sound. Harry crossed to the bedroom on tiptoe, slipped inside, closed the door, and turned to collapse on his bed. The trouble was, there was already someone sitting on it. แล้วก็จบแล้วนะคะสำหรับแฮร์รี่พอตเตอร์ภาค2 chapter 1นะคะก็มีแค่10 หน้าเองนะแล้วทำไมหน้าฉันมันไม่จับให้ฉันวาดฉันงงมากแล้วมันแหลกด้วยนะงง สิ่งมีชีวิตล้านปีแสงมาchapter นี้เนี่ยก็ไม่ได้มีอะไรมากนะเพราะว่ามันจะเป็นการเหมือนกับการเกริ่นซะมากกว่าเกริ่นว่าก่อนหน้านี้มันเกิดอะไรขึ้นบ้างอะไรอย่างเงี้ยประมาณนั้นก็คือเหมือนเป็นการเกริ่นว่าภาคที่แล้วเกิดอะไรขึ้นบ้างมีใครเกิดอะไรขึ้นแล้วก็วันนี้เนี่ยในเรื่องเนี่ยเป็นวันเกิดของแฮร์รี่ด้วยแต่ว่าไอ้บ้านตระกูลเดอร์ซี่มันเหมือนมันจำไม่ได้หรือไม่อยากจำก็ไม่รู้นะแล้วก็วันนั้นเนี่ยจะมีเหมือนลูกค้าที่เป็นแขกสำคัญของลุงเวอร์นอนเนี่ยมาเยี่ยมบ้านนะก็เลยบอกให้แฮร์รี่เนี่ยอยู่เงียบๆในห้องทำตัวเหมือนตัวเองไม่มีตัวตนเนี่ยมันจะได้ไม่ลำบากใครเนาะแล้วตอนแรกเนี่ยแฮร์รี่เนี่ยก่อนที่จะถึงเวลาใช่ไหมก็ไปนั่งอะไรอยู่ตรงหลังบ้านใช่ไหมแล้วอยู่ดีดัลลี่ก็โผล่มาก็แบบว่าอารมณ์เหมือนว่ากูรู้นะวันนี้วันเกิดมึงอะไรเงี้ยแล้วก็แบบว่าไม่มีใครส่งอะไรไม่มีใครส่งการ์ดอวยพรหรืออะไรมาให้หรอกแล้วแฮร์รี่ก็เหมือนแกล้งดัลลี่ไปก็เลยแบบว่าประมาณนั้นสุดท้ายเนี่ยก็เลยตัวบทที่ว่าไอคนแขกลูกค้าของวอนนั่นเนี่ยก็มาถึงบ้านพอดีและแฮร์รี่ก็ขึ้นบ้านไปกะว่าจะไปนอนบนเตียงแต่สิ่งที่ตลกก็คือว่าบนเตียงเนี่ยมีบุคคลปริศนาอยู่บนเตียงแล้วนะ โอเคอุ๊ปส์สักครู่นะคะคือฉันต้องแบบว่าพักคอสักพักหนึ่งเลยอ่ะเพราะว่าเนี่ยเสียงฉันแหบมากโอเคนะสักครู่นะคะกลับมาแล้วทรมาน VTube moment ขออนุญาตนอกเรื่องแล้วกันคือฉันยังนึกไม่ออกเลยว่าวีคหน้าฉันจะไลฟ์ทำอะไรบ้างอ่ะ ไม่รู้ว่าวีคหน้าจะได้ไลฟ์7 วันรวดหรือเปล่าก็ต้องรอดูก่อนว่าฉันจะลงตารางว่าทำอะไรบ้างนะโอเคนะคะขอดูก่อนว่าchapterที่2เนี่ยมีกี่หน้านะโอเคchapter 2มี12 หน้านะนิดเดียวเหมือนบทแรกๆกับบทหน้าจะน้อยแต่หลังๆอ่ะหน้าหลังๆบทจะเยอะรู้สึกนะโอเคแล้วคือวันนี้เงียบเหงามากเลยนะช่างมันโอเคเราไปต่อกับ chapter ที่2กันดีกว่านะคะก็คือ Dobby's warning หรือว่าคำเตือนของ Dobby นั่นเองคือฉันไม่เข้าใจว่ากล้องฉันมันเป็นอะไรทำไมมันไม่จับหน้าฉันงงอ่ะช่างมันเถอะไม่เป็นไรอย่างน้อยว่าน้องโมเดลฉันก็คือแค่อยู่ตรงนั้นแหละวันนี้ฉันต้องอ่านแบบเงยหน้าอ่านหรองงเหมือนกันช่างมันเรามาอ่านต่อกันดีกว่านะคะ Chapter 2 Dobby's Warning Harry managed not to shout out but it was a close thing. The little creature on the bed had a large bat-like ears and bulging green eyes the size of tennis balls. Harry knew instantly that this was what had been watching him out the garden hedge that morning. As they stared at each other, Harry heard Dudley's voice from the hall. "May I take your coats, Mr. and Mrs. Mason?" The creature slipped off the bed and bowed so low that the end of its long thin nose touched the carpet. Harry noticed that it was wearing what looks like an old pillowcase. with ribs for arms and legs whole. Hello? Said Harry nervously. Harry Potter, said the creature in a high-pitched voice Harry was sure would carry down the stairs. So long has Dobby wanted to meet you, sir. Such an honor it is. Thank you, said Harry, edging along the wall and sinking into his desk chair next to Hedwig, who was asleep in her large cage. He wanted to ask, "What are you?" but thought it would sound too rude, so instead he said, "Who are you?" "Dobby, sir. Just Dobby. Dobby the house elf," said the creature. "Oh, really?" said Harry. I don't want to be rude or anything, but this isn't a great time for me to have a house elf in my bedroom." Aunt Petunia's high false laugh sounded from the living room. The elf hung his head. "Not that I'm not pleased to meet you," said Harry quickly, "but, is there any particular reason you're here?" "Oh, yes, sir," said Dobby earnestly. "Dobby has come to tell you, sir. It is difficult, sir." Dobby wonders where to begin. "Sit down," said Harry politely, pointing at the bed. To his horror, the elf burst into tears. Very noisy tears. "Sit down," he wailed. "Never, never, ever." Harry thought he heard the voices downstairs falter. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to offend you or anything." "Offend Dobby?" shouted the elf. "Dobby has never been asked to sit down by a wizard like an equal." Harry, trying to say shh and looked comforting at the same time, ushered Dobby back onto the bed, where he sat coughing, looking like a large and very ugly doll. At last, he managed to control himself and sat with his great eyes fixed on Harry in an expression of watery adoration. "You can't have many decent visitors," said Harry, trying to cheer him up. Dobby shook his head. Then, without warning, he leapt up and started banging his head furiously on the window, shouting, "Bad Dobby! Bad Dobby!" "Don't! What are you doing?" Harry hissed, springing up and pulling Dobby back onto the bed. Hedwig had woken up with a particularly loud screech and was beating her wings wildly against the bars of her cage. "Dobby had to punish himself, sir," said the elf, who had gone slightly cross-eyed. "Dobby almost spoke ill of his family, sir." "Your family?" "The wizard family Dobby serves, sir. Dobby is a house elf, bound to serve one house and one family forever." ไม่ใช่ปะขนาดฉันปรับตำแหน่งไมค์ขนาดฉันปรับคำดังไมค์มันก็ยังจะช็อตให้เหนื่อยแล้วดีนะฉันตั้งใจว่าจะสั่งไมค์ใหม่แล้วนะก็คือแบบโอ้ยไมค์กูขยันช็อตมากอีดอกเอ้ยสักครู่นะ คือไม่รู้ว่าจะทำไงให้ไมค์มันไม่ช็อตแหละเหนื่อยมากเอาจริงช่างมันเถอะอ่านต่อนะคะ "Do they know you're here?" asked Harry curiously. Dobby shuddered. "Oh no, sir, no. Dobby will have to punish himself most grievously for coming to see you, sir. Dobby will have to shut his ears in the oven door for this, if they ever knew, sir. But won't they notice if you shut your ears in the oven door?" "Dobby doubts it, sir. Dobby is always having to punish himself for something, sir. They let Dobby get on with it, sir. Sometimes it reminds me to the extra punishment. But why don't you leave, Escape? A house elf must be set free, sir, and the family will never set Dobby free. Dobby will serve the family until he dies, sir." Harry stared. "And I thought I was hard done by staying here for another 4 weeks," he said. "This made the Dursleys sound almost human. Can anyone help you? Can I?" Almost at once, Harry wished he hadn't spoken. Dobby dissolved again into wails of gratitude. "Please," Harry whispered frantically, "please be quiet. If the Dursleys hear anything, if they know you're here." Harry Potter asked if he can help Dobby. "Dobby has heard your greatness, sir, but of your goodness Dobby never knew." Harry, who was feeling distinctly hot in the face, said, "Whatever you've heard about my greatness is a load of rubbish. I'm not even on top of my year at Hogwarts. That's Hermione. But he stopped quickly, because thinking about Hermione was painful. Harry Potter is humble and modest," said Dobby reverently, his orb-like eyes aglow. "Harry Potter speak not of his triumph over he who must not be named." "Voldemort?" said Harry. Dobby clapped his hands over his bad ears and moaned, "Ah, speak not the name, sir. Speak not the name." "Sorry," said Harry quickly. "I know lots of people don't like it. My friend Ron..." He stopped again. Thinking about Ron was painful too. Dobby leaned towards Harry, his eyes wide as headlamps. Dobby heard tell, he said hoarsely, that Harry Potter met the Dark Lord for the second time, just weeks ago. That Harry Potter escaped yet again. Harry nodded and Dobby's eyes suddenly shone with tears. "Ah, sir," he gasped, dabbling his face with the corner of his grubby pillowcase he was wearing. "Harry Potter is valiant and bold. He has braved so many dangers already." But Dobby has to come to protect Harry Potter to warn him, even if he does have to shut his ears in oven door later. Harry Potter must not go back to Hogwarts. There was a silence broken only by the chink of knives and forks from downstairs and the distant rumble of Uncle Vernon's voice. "What?" Harry stammered. "But I've got to go back. Term starts on September the 1st. It's all that's keeping me going. You don't know what it's like here. I don't belong here. I belong in your world, at Hogwarts." No, squeaked Dobby, shaking his head so hard his ears flapped. อุ้ยสวัสดีคุณอันนะคะนี่เข้าสู่สิ่งของเสื้อคนในวันนี้นะมาอ่านต่อนะคะ Harry Potter must stay where he is safe. He is too great, too good to lose. If Harry Potter goes back to Hogwarts, he will be in mortal danger. "Why?" said Harry in surprise. "There is a plot, Harry Potter. A plot to make the most terrible things happen at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry this year," whispered Dobby, suddenly trembling all over. "Dobby has known it for months, sir. Harry Potter must not put himself in peril. He is too important, sir." "What terrible things?" said Harry at once. "Who's plotting them?" Dobby made a funny choking noise and then banged his head madly against the wall. "All right," cried Harry, grabbing the elf's arm to stop him. "You can't say I understand, but why are you warning me?" A sudden, unpleasant thought struck him. "Hang on. This hasn't got anything to do with with you know who, has it? You could just shake or nod," he added hastily as Dobby's head tilted wrongly close to the wall again. Slowly, Dobby shook his head. Not he who must not be named, sir." But Dobby's eyes were wide and he seemed to be trying to give Harry a hint. Harry, however, was completely at sea. "He hasn't got a brother, has he?" Dobby shook his head, his eyes wider than ever. "Well then, I can't think of who else would have had a chance of making horrible things happen at Hogwarts," said Harry. "I mean, there's Dumbledore. For one thing, you know who Dumbledore is, don't you?" Dobby bowed his head. "Albus Dumbledore is the greatest headmaster at Hogwarts has ever had." But Dobby knows it. "Sir, Dobby has heard Dumbledore's power rivals of those he who must not be named at the height of strength. But sir," Dobby's voice dropped to an urgent whisper, "there are powers Dumbledore doesn't. Powers no decent wizard." And before Harry could stop him, Dobby bounded off the bed, seized Harry's dead slam, and started beating himself around the head with ear-splitting yelps. A sudden silence fell downstairs. 2 seconds later, Harry heard thudding madly. Heard Uncle Vernon coming into the hall, calling, "Dudley must have left his television on again. That little tyke. Quick, in the wardrobe," hissed Harry, stuffing Dobby in the shutting door and flinging himself onto the bed just as the door handle turned. "What the devil are you doing?" said Uncle Vernon, through gritted teeth, his face horribly close to Harry's. You've just ruined the punchline of my Japanese go-for joke. One more sound and you wish you'd never been born, boy. He stomped flat-footed off the room, shaking. Harry led Dobby out of the wardrobe. See what it's like here? He said. See why I've got to go back to Hogwarts? It's the only place I've got. Well, I think I got friends. Friends who don't even write to Harry Potter? Said Dobby slyly. I expect they just been... Hang on, said Harry frowning. How do you know my friends haven't been writing to me? Dobby shuffled his feet. Harry Potter mustn't be angry with Dobby. Dobby did it for the best. Have you been snubbing my letters? Dobby has them here, sir, said the elf, stepping nimbly out of Harry's reach. He pulled a thick wad of envelopes from the inside of the pillowcase he was wearing. Harry could make out Hermione's neat writing, Ron's untidy scrawl, and even a scribble that looked like as though it was from the Hogwarts gamekeeper, Hagrid. Dobby blinked anxiously up at Harry. Harry Potter mustn't be angry, Dobby hoped. If Harry Potter thought his friends had forgotten him, Harry Potter might not want to go back to school, sir. Harry wasn't listening. He made a grab for the letters, but Dobby jumped out of the reach. Harry Potter will have them, sir, if he gives Dobby his word that he will not return to Hogwarts. Ah, sir, this is a danger you must not face. Say you won't go back, sir. No, said Harry angrily. Give me my friend's letters. Then Harry Potter leaves Dobby's no choice, said the elf sadly. Before Harry could move, Dobby had darted to the bedroom door, pulled it open, and sprinted down the stairs. Mouth dry, stomach lurching, Harry sprang after him, trying not to make a sound. He jumped the last 6 stairs, landing cat-like on the hall carpet, looking around for Dobby from the dining room. He heard Uncle Vernon saying, "Tell Petunia that very funny story about those American plumbers. Mr. Mason, she's been dying to hear." Harry ran up the hall into the kitchen and felt his stomach disappear. Aunt Petunia, masterpiece of a pudding, the mountain of cream and sugared violets, was floating up near the ceiling. On top of the cupboard in the corner crouched Dobby. "No," croaked Harry. "Please, they'll kill me. Harry Potter must say he's not going back to school." "Dobby, please." "Say, sir." "I can't." Dobby gave him a tragic look. "Then Dobby must do it, sir, for Harry Potter's own good." The pudding fell to the floor with a heart-stopping crash. Cream splattered the windows and walls as the dish shattered with a crack like a whip. Dobby vanished. There were screams from the dining room, and Uncle Vernon burst into the kitchen to find Harry, rigid with chalk, covered from head to foot in Aunt Petunia's pudding. At first, it looked as though Uncle Vernon would manage to gloss the whole thing over. Just our nephew, very disturbed. Meeting strangers upset him, so we kept him upstairs. He shooed the shocked Masons back into the dining room, promised Harry he would flay him within an inch of his life, and when the Masons had left, and handed him a mop, Aunt Petunia dug some ice cream on the freezer, and Harry, still shaking, started scrubbing the kitchen clean. Uncle Vernon might still have been able to make his deal if it hadn't been for the hour. Aunt Petunia was just handling a round box of after-dinner mints when a huge barn owl swooped through the dining room window and dropped a letter on Mrs. Mason's head, and swooped out again. Mrs. Mason screamed like a banshee and ran from the house, shouting about lunatics. Mr. Mason stayed just long enough to tell the Dursley that his wife was mortally afraid of birds of all shapes and sizes, and to ask whether this was their idea of a joke. Harry stood in the kitchen, clutching the mop for support as Uncle Vernon advanced on him, a demonic glint in his tiny eyes. "Read it," he hissed evilly, brandishing the letter the owl had just delivered. "Read it. Go on." Harry took it. It did not contain birthday greetings. "Dear Mr. Potter, we have received intelligence that our charm was used at your place of residence this evening at 12 minutes past 9. As you know, underage wizards are not permitted to perform spells outside school, and further spell work on your part may lead to expulsion from the said school. Decree for reasonable restriction of underage sorcery, 1875, paragraph C. We would also ask you to remember that any magical activity which was noticed by members of the non-magical community, Muggles, is a serious offense under the Section 13 of the International Confederation of Warlocks Statute of Secrecy. Enjoy your holidays. Yours sincerely, Mafalda Hopkirk. Improper use of magic. Office, Ministry of Magic. Harry looked up from the letter and gulped. You didn't tell us you weren't allowed to use magic outside school? Said Uncle Vernon, a mad gleam dancing in his eyes. Forgot to mention it. Slipped your mind, I dare say. He was bearing down Harry like a great bulldog, all his teeth bared. Well, I've got news for you, boy. I'm locking you up. You're never going back to that school. Never. And if you try and match yourself out, they'll expel you. And laughing like a maniac, he dragged Harry back upstairs. Uncle Vernon was as bad as his words. The following morning, he paid a man to fit bars on Harry's window. He himself fit in a cat flap in the bedroom door, so small that amounts of food could be pushed inside 3 times a day. They let Harry out to use the bathroom morning and evening. Otherwise, he was locked in his room around the clock. 3 days later, the Dursleys were showing no signs of relenting, and Harry couldn't see any way out of his situation. He lay on his bed watching the sun sinking behind the bars on the window and wondered miserably what was going to happen to him. What was the good of magicking himself out of his room if Hogwarts would expel him for doing it? Yet life at Privet Drive had reached an all-time low. Now the Dursley knew they weren't going to wake up as fruit bats. He had lost his only weapon. Dobby might have saved Harry from horrible happenings at Hogwarts, but the way things were going, he'd probably starve to death anyways. The cat flap rattled and Aunt Petunia's hand appeared pushing a bowl of tin soup into a room. Harry, whose insides were aching with hunger, jumped off his bed and seized it. The soup was stone cold, but he drank half of it in one gulp. Then he crossed the room to Hedwig's cage and tipped the soggy vegetable at the bottom of the bowl into her empty food tray. She ruffled her feathers and gave him a look of deep disgust. It's no good turning your beak up at it. That's all we've got, said Harry grimly. He put the empty bowl back on the floor next to the cat flap and lay back down on the bed, somehow even hungrier than he had been for the soup. Supposing he was still alive in another 4 weeks, what would happen if he didn't turn up at Hogwarts? Would someone be sent to see why he hadn't come back? Would they be able to make the Dursley let him go? The room was growing dark, exhausted, stomach rumbling, mind spinning over the same unanswerable question. Harry fell into an uneasy sleep. He dreamed he was on a show in a zoo with a card-reading underage wizard attached to his cage. People goggled through the bars at him as he lay, starving and weak, on a bed of straw. He saw Dobby's face in the crowd and shouted out, asking for help. But Dobby called, "Harry Potter is safe there, sir," and vanished. Then the Dursley appeared and Dudley rattled the bars of the cage, laughing at him. "Stop it," Harry murmured as the rattling pounded in his sore head. "Leave me alone. Cut it out. I'm trying to sleep." He opened his eyes. Moonlight was shining through the bars on the window, and someone was goggling through the bars at him. A freckled-faced, red-haired, long-nosed someone. Ron Weasley was outside Harry's window. แล้วก็จบแล้วนะคะสำหรับ chapter ที่2นะคะก็ chapter นี้เนี่ยก็จะพูดถึงว่าหลังจากที่แฮร์รี่เนี่ยได้เจอกับสิ่งมีชีวิตแปลกประหลาดที่อยู่บนเตียงใช่ไหมซึ่งมันก็คือด็อบบี้เป็นเอลฟ์ประจำบ้านซึ่งด็อบบี้เนี่ยก็ได้มาเตือนแฮร์รี่ว่าจะเกิดเรื่องไม่ดีที่ฮอกวอตส์อย่ากลับไปเลยแต่แฮร์รี่เนี่ยก็ไม่ยอมเนาะเขาเลยว่ากูอยู่กับครอบครัวเดอร์ซี่แล้วแม่งปฏิบัติกูไม่ดีกูอยากกลับไปเรียนอยู่แล้วกูมีเพื่อนกูมีความสุขที่เรียนใช่ไหมแต่ด็อบบี้เห็นอย่างนั้นก็เลยแบบว่าสร้างความปั่นป่วนจนแฮร์รี่แบบว่าโดนครอบครัวโดนลุงวัวนอนขังไว้บนห้องก็คือปฏิบัติเหมือนนักโทษเลยให้อาหารวันละ3 ครั้งอะไรเงี้ยออกทางห้องได้แค่ไปเข้าห้องน้ำประมาณนั้นก็คือแบบว่าความเป็นอยู่ทรหดมากสุดท้ายเนี่ยแฮร์รี่ก็เหมือนฝันร้ายไปเข้าตื่นมาเนี่ยก็เจอว่ารอนเนี่ยอยู่ที่หน้าต่างของห้องนอนแฮร์รี่เพราะว่าห้องนอนแฮร์รี่เนี่ยเหมือนลุงวัวนอนเนี่ยมันเอากรงเหล็กอะมาจัดใส่หน้าต่างห้องนอนแฮร์รี่ประมาณนั้นก็คือขังไม่ให้ออกตรงหน้าต่างนั่นแหละแล้วรอนก็โผล่มาตรงนั้นนะก็คือเป็นตอนจบของ chapter 2 นี่แหละ เดี๋ยวดูขออนุญาตดูก่อนว่า chapter 3 มีกี่หน้านะ chapter 3 มีทั้งหมด 18 หน้านะคะchapter สุดท้ายแล้วของเรานะ โอเคเนาะไม่ให้เสียเวลานะคะเราไปเริ่ม chapter 3 กันต่อดีกว่านะคะกับ the burrow นะคะburrow เนี่ยแปลว่าโพรงกระต่ายเนาะเริ่มกันเถอะ Chapter 3 The Burrow Ron breathed Harry, creeping to the window and pushing it up so they could talk through the bars. Ron, how did you... What the... Harry's mouth fell open as the full impact on what he was seeing hit him. Ron was leaning out the back window of an old turquoise car, which was parked in mid-air. Grinning at Harry from the front seats were Fred and George, Ron's elder twin brothers. Alright, Harry? What has been going on? Said Ron. Why haven't you been answering my letters? I've asked you to stay about 12 times. Then Dad came home and said you've got an official warning for using magic in front of muggles. It wasn't me, and how do you know? He works for the ministry, said Ron. You know we're not supposed to do spells outside school. Bit rich coming from you, said Harry, staring at the floating car. Oh, this doesn't count, said Ron. We're only borrowing it. This is theirs. We didn't enchant it, but doing magic in front of those muggles you live with. I told you I didn't, but it'll take too long to explain now. Look, can you explain to them at Hogwarts that the Dursley have locked me up and won't let me come back, and obviously I can't magic myself out, because the ministry think that's the second spell I've done in 3 days, so... Stop gibbering, said Ron. We've come to take you home with us. But you can't magic me out either. We don't need to, said Ron, jerking his head towards the front seat and grinning. You forget who I've got with me? Tie that round bars, said Fred, throwing the end of the rope to Harry. If the Dursley wake up, I'm dead, said Harry as he tied the rope tightly around the bar, and Fred revved up the car. Don't worry, said Fred, and stand back. He moved back to the shadows next to Hedwig, who seemed to have realized how important this was to keep still and silent. The car revved louder, and suddenly, with a crunching noise, the bars were pulled and cleaned out of the window. As Fred drove straight up in the air, Harry ran back to the window to see the bars dangling a few feet above the ground. Panting, Ron hoisted them up into the car. Harry listened anxiously, but there was no sound from the Dursleys' bedroom. When the bars were safely in the back seat with Ron, Fred reversed as close as possible to Harry's windows. Get in, Ron said. But all my Hogwarts stuff, my wand, my broomstick, where is it? Locked in the cupboard under the stairs, and I can't get out of this room. No problem, said George from the front passenger seat. Out the way, Harry. Fred and George climbed carefully through the window into Harry's room. You had to hand it to them, though, thought Harry, as George took an ordinary hairpin from his pocket and started to pick the lock. A lot of wizards think it's a waste of time knowing this sort of muggle trick, said Fred, but we'll feel their skills worth learning, even if they're a bit slow. There was a small click and the door swung open. So we'll get your trunk. You grab anything you need from your room and we'll hand it out to Ron, whispered George. Watch out for the bottom stair, it creaks, Harry whispered back as the twin disappeared into the dark landing. Harry dashed around his room, collecting his things together and passing them out the window to Ron. Then he went to help Fred and George heave his trunk up the stairs. Harry heard Uncle Vernon cough. At last, panting, they reached the landing, then carried the trunk through Harry's room to the open window. Fred climbed back into the car to pull with Ron, and Harry and George pushed from the bedroom side. Inch by inch, the trunk slid through the window. Uncle Vernon coughed again. A bit more, panted Fred, who was pulling from inside the car. One good push. Harry and George drew their shoulder against the trunk, and it slid out the window into the back seat of the car. Okay, let's go, George whispered, but as Harry climbed onto the windowsill, there came a sudden loud screech from behind him, followed immediately by the thunder of Uncle Vernon's voice. That ruddy owl! I've forgotten Hedwig! Harry tore back across the room as the landing light clicked on. He snatched up Hedwig's cage, dashed into the window, and passed it out to Ron. He was scrambling back onto the shelves of the drawers when Uncle Vernon hammered on the unlocked door, and it crashed open. For a split second, Uncle Vernon stood framed in the doorway, then he let out a bellow like an angry bull, and dived at Harry, grabbing him by the ankle. Ron, Fred, George seized Harry's arm and pulled as hard as they could. Petunia, Ron, Uncle Vernon. He's getting away! He's getting away! The Weasleys gave a gigantic tug, and Harry's legs slid out of Uncle Vernon's grasp. As soon as Harry was in the car and had slammed the door shut, Ron yelled, "Put your foot down, Fred!" and the car shot suddenly towards the moon. Harry couldn't believe it. He was free. He rolled down the window, the night air whipping his hair. He looked back at the shrinking rooftops of Prevent Drive. Uncle Vernon and Petunia and Dudley were all hanging, dumbstruck, out of Harry's window. "See you next summer," Harry yelled. The Weasley roared with laughter, and Harry settled back in his seat, grinning from ear to ear. "Let Hedwig out," he told Ron. "She can fly behind us. She hasn't had a chance to stretch her wings for ages." George handed a hairpin to Ron, and a moment later, Hedwig had soared joyfully out the window to glide along beside them like a ghost. "So what's the story, Harry?" said Ron impatiently. "What's been happening?" Harry told them all about Dobby, the warning he'd given Harry, and the fiasco of the violet pudding. There was a long chalked silence where he had finished. "Very fishy," said Fred finally. "Definitely dodgy," agreed George. "So he wouldn't even tell you who's supposed to be plotting all this stuff?" "I don't think he could," said Harry. "I told you, every time he got close to letting something slip, he started banging his head against the wall." He saw Fred and George look at each other. "What? You think he was lying to me?" "Well," said Fred, "put it this way. House elves have got powerful magic of their own, but they can't usually use it without their master's permission. I reckon old Dobby was sent to stop you coming back from Hogwarts. Someone's ideas of a joke. Can you think of anyone at school with a grudge against you?" "Yes," said Harry and Ron together instantly. "Draco Malfoy," Harry explained. "He hates me." "Draco Malfoy?" said George, turning round. "Not Lucius Malfoy's son?" "Must be. It's not a very common name, is it?" said Harry. "Why?" "I've heard Dad talking about him," said George. "He was a very big supporter of you-know-who." "And when you-know-who disappeared," said Fred, craning around to look at Harry, "Lucius Malfoy came back saying he never meant of it. Load of dung. Dad reckons he was right in you-knows-who inner circle." Harry had heard these rumors about Malfoy's family before, and they didn't surprise him at all. Draco Malfoy made Dudley Dursley look like a kind, thoughtful, sensitive boy. "I don't know whether the Malfoys own House Elf," said Harry. "Well, whoever owns him will be an old visiting family, and they'll be rich," said Fred. "Yeah, Mom's always wishing we had a house elf to do the ironing," said George, "but all we've got is a lousy old ghoul in the attic and gnomes all over the garden. House elves come with big old manors and castles and places like that. You wouldn't catch one in our house." Harry was silent. Judging by the fact that Draco Malfoy usually had the best of everything, his family was rolling in visit gold, he could just see Malfoy strutting around a large manor house, sending the family servant to stop Harry going back to Hogwarts. Also sound exactly like the sort of thing Malfoy would do. Had Harry been stupid to take Dobby seriously? "I'm glad we came back to get you anyway," said Ron. "I was getting really worried when you didn't answer any of my letters. I thought it was Arrow's fault at first." "Who's Arrow?" "Our owl. He's an ancient. It wouldn't be the first time he collapsed on a delivery. So I tried to borrow Hermes." "Who?" "The owl Mom and Dad bought Percy when he was made a prefect," said Fred from the front. "But Percy wouldn't lend him to me," said Ron. "Said he needed him. Percy's been acting very oddly this summer," said George, frowning. สวัสดีคุณม่อนนะคะแล้วก็ยินดีต้อนรับเข้าสู่เสียงของคุณในวันนี้นะคะเห็นคุณม่อนแอบมาดักสตรีมฉันหรอโอเคมาอ่านต่อ "And he has been sending lots of letters and spending a load of time shutting up in his room. I mean, there's only so many times you can polish a prefect badge. You're driving too far west, Fred," he added, pointing at the compass on the dashboard. Fred twiddled on the steering wheel. "So does your dad know you've got a car?" said Harry, guessing the answer. No," said Ron. "He had to work tonight. Hopefully we'll be able to get back in the garage without Mom noticing we flew it. What does your dad do at the Ministry of Magic anyway? He works in the most boring department, said Ron. The misuse of Muggle's artifact office. The what? It's all to do with bewitching things that are Muggle made, you know, in case they end up back in a Muggle shop or house. Like last year, some old witch died at her tea set was sold to an antique shop. This Muggle woman bought it, took it home and tried to serve her friends tea in it. It was a nightmare. Dad was working overtime for weeks. What happened? The teapot went berserk and squirted boiling tea all over the place, and one man ended up in hospital with the sugar tongs clamped onto his nose. Dad was going frantic. It's only him and an old warlock called Perkins in the office, and they had to do memory charms and all sorts to cover it up. But your dad, this car? Fred laughed. Yeah, Dad's mad about everything to do with Muggles. Our chef's full of Muggle stuff. He takes it apart, puts spells on it, and puts it back together again. If he raided our house, he'd have to put himself out straight under arrest. It drives my mom mad. That's the main road, said George, peering down through the windscreen. We'll be there in 10 minutes, just as well. It's getting light. A faint pinkish glow was visible along the horizon to the east. Fred brought the car lower, and Harry sat dark patchwork of fields and a clump of trees. We're a little way outside the village, said George. Utterly St. Catchpole. Lower and lower went the flying car. The edge of brilliant red sun was now gleaming through the trees. Touchdown, said Fred, as with a slight bump, they hit the ground. They had landed next to a tumble-down garage in a small yard, and Harry looked out for the first time at Ron's house. It looked as though it had been once a large stone pigsty, but extra room had been added here and there until it was several stories high, and so crooked it looked as though it was held up by magic, which Harry reminded himself it probably was. 4 or 5 chimneys were perched on top of the red roof. A lopsided sign struck in the ground near the entrance read, "The Burrow." Round the front door lay a jumble of Wellington boots, and over a rusty cauldron, several fat brown chickens were cooking on the It's not much, said Ron. อุ้ยขอบคุณสำคัญประกอบ10 บาทนะครับจากคุณอันและคุณแซลมอนนะครับคิดถึงเหมือนกันช่วงนี้ไม่ค่อยได้คุยกันเลยเรา3 คนเนาะโอเคกลับมาต่อนะคะถึงไหนแล้ววะIt's brilliant, said Harry happily, thinking up Private Drive. They got out of the car. Now we'll go upstairs really quietly, said Fred, and wait for Mom to call us for breakfast. Then Ron, you come bounding downstairs going, Mom, look who turned up in the night. And she'll be all pleased to see Harry, and no one need ever know we flew the car. Right, said Ron. Come on, Harry, I sleep at the... Ron had gone a nasty greenish color, his eyes fixed on the house. The other 3 wheeled around. Mrs. Weasley was marching across the yard, scattering chickens, and for a short, plump, kind-faced woman, it was remarkable how much she looked like a saber-toothed tiger. Ah, said Fred. Oh dear, said George. Mrs. Weasley came to a halt in front of them, her hands on her hips, staring from one guilty face to the next. She was wearing a flowered apron with a wand sticking out of the pocket. So, she said. Morning, Mom, said George, in what he clearly thought was a jaunty, winning voice. Have you got any idea how worried I've been? Said Mrs. Weasley in a deadly whisper. Sorry, Mom, but we had to. All 3 of Mrs. Weasley's sons were taller than her as she was, but they cowered as her rage broke over them. Bed's empty. No note. Car gone. Could have crashed. Out of my mind with worry. Did you care? Never. As long as I've lived. You wait until your father gets home. We never had trouble like this from Bill or Charlie or Percy. Perfect Percy, muttered Fred. You could do with taking leaf out of Percy's book, yelled Mrs. Weasley, prodding a finger in Fred's chest. You could have died. You could have been seen. You could have lost your father's his job. It seemed to go on for hours. Mrs. Weasley had shouted herself hoarse before she turned on Harry, who backed away. I'm very pleased to see you, Harry dear, she said. Come in, have some breakfast. She turned and walked back into the house. Harry felt nervous after a glance at Ron, who nodded encouragingly. The kitchen was small and rather cramped. There was a scrubbed wooden table and chairs in the middle, and Harry sat down at the edge of his seat, looking around. He had never been to a wizard house before. The clock on the wall opposite to him only has one hand, no numbers at all. Written around the edge were things like time to make tea, time to feed the chickens, and you're late. Books were stacked too deep and on mantelpiece. Books with titles like Charm Your Own Cheese, Enchantment in Baking, and 1 Minute Feast. It's magic! And unless Harry's ears were deceiving him, the old radio next to his sink had just announced the coming up was Witching Hour with the popular singer-sorceress Celestina Warbeck. Mrs. Weasley was clattering around, cooking breakfast a little haphazardly, throwing dirty looks at her son as she threw sausage into the frying pan. Every now and then, she muttered things like, "Don't know what you're thinking of," and never would have believed it. "I don't blame you, dear," she assured Harry, tipping 8 or 9 sausage onto his plate. "Arthur and I have been worried about you, too. Just last night we were saying we'd come and get you ourselves if you hadn't written back to Ron by Friday, but really, she was now adding 3 fried eggs to his plates. Flying an illegal car halfway across the country, anyone could have seen you." She flickered her wand casually at the washing up in the sink, which began to clean itself, clinking gently in the background. "It was cloudy, Mum," said Fred. "You keep your mouth closed while you're eating," Mrs. Weasley snapped. "They were starving, Mum," said George. "And you," said Mrs. Weasley, but it was with a slightly softened expression that she started cutting Harry's bread and buttering it for him. At that moment, there was a diversion in the form of a small, red-headed figure in a long night dress, who appeared in the kitchen, gave a small squeal, and ran out again. "Ginny," said Ron in an undertone to Harry, "my sister,
I want to
she's
eat
been
potato."
talking about you all summer." เฮ้ยขอบคุณค่าหมูกรอบ10ค่าหมูกรอบ10 บาทจากคุณแซลมอนนะคะ I want to eat อะไรนะฉันอ่านไม่ทันโอเคอ่านต่อนะ "Yeah, she'll be wanting your autograph, Harry," grinned Fred, when he caught his mother's eye and bent his face over his plate without another word. Nothing more was said until all 4 plates were clean, which took surprisingly short time. "Blimey, I'm tired," yawned Fred, setting down his knife and fork at last. "I think I'll go to bed and—" "You will not," snapped Mrs. Weasley. "It's your own fault you've been up all night. You're going to de-gnome the garden for me. You're getting completely out of hand again." "Oh, Mum, and you too," she said, glaring at Ron and George. "You can go up to bed, dear." She added to Harry, "You didn't ask them to fly that wretched car." But Harry, who felt wide awake, said quickly, "I'll help, Ron. I've never seen de-gnoming." "That's very sweet of you, dear, but it don't work," said Mrs. Weasley. "Now, let's see what Lockhart got to say on the subject." And she pulled a heavy book from the stack of mantelpiece. George groaned. "Mum, we know how to de-gnome a garden." Harry looked to the cover of Mrs. Weasley's book. Written across in fancy gold letters were the word Gilderoy Lockhart's Guide to Household Pests. There was a big photograph of the front, a very good-looking wizard with wavy blonde hair and bright blue eyes. As always in the wizarding world, the photograph was moving. Wizard, who Harry had supposed was Gilderoy Lockhart, kept winking cheekily up on them all. Mrs. Weasley beamed down at him. "Oh, he is marvelous," she said. "He knows his household pests all right. It's a wonderful book. Mum fancies him," said Fred in a very audible whisper. "Don't be so ridiculous, Fred," said Mrs. Weasley, her cheeks rather pink. "All right, if you think you know better than Lockhart, you can go and get on with it, and woe betide you if there's a single gnome in that garden when I come out to inspect it." Yawning and grumbling, the Weasleys slouched outside with Harry behind them. The garden was large in Harry's eyes, exactly what a garden should be. The Dursley wouldn't have liked it. There were plenty of weeds and the grass needed cutting, but there were now trees all around the walls, and plants Harry had never seen, spilling from a flower bed and big green pond full of frogs. "Muggles have got a gnome too, you know," Harry told Ron as they crossed the lawn. Yeah, I've seen those things. They think they're gnomes, said Ron, bent double his head in a peony bush, like fat little Father Christmases with fishing rods. There was a violent scuffling noise. Then Peony Bush shuddered and Ron straightened up. This is a gnome, he said grimly. Get off me! Get off me! Squealed off the gnome. It was certainly nothing like Father Christmas. It was small and leathery looking, with large, nobly bald head, exactly like a potato. Ron held it at arm's length as it kicked out at him. With its horny little feet, it grasped around his ankles and turned it upside down. This is what you have to do, he said. He raised the gnome above his head, and he started to swing it in a great circle like a lasso. Seeing the shocked look on Harry's face, Ron added, It doesn't hurt them, you just got to make them really dizzy so they can find their way back to gnome holes. He let go of the gnome's ankle. It flew 20 feet into the air and landed with a thud in the field over the hedge. Pitiful, said Fred. I bet I can get mine beyond the stump. Harry learned quickly not to feel too sorry for the gnomes. He decided just to drop the first one he caught over the hedge, but the gnome, sensing weakness, sank its razor-sharp teeth into Harry's finger, and he had a hard job shaking it off until... Wow, Harry, that must have been 50 feet. The air was soon thick with flying gnomes. See, they're not too bright, said George, seizing 5 or 6 gnomes at once. The moment they know the gnoming's going through, they storm off to have a look. You think they have learned just now to stay put? Soon, the crowd of gnomes in the field started waking away in a staggering line, their little shoulder hunched. They'll be back, said Ron, as they watched the gnomes disappear into the hedge on the other side of the field. They love it here. Dad's too soft with them. He thinks they're funny. Just then, the front door slammed. He's back, said George. Dad's home. They hurried through the garden and back into the house. Mr. Weasley was slumped in the kitchen in a chair with his glass off and his eyes closed. He was a thin man, going bald, but the little hair he had was red as any of his children's. He was wearing long green robes which were dusty and travel-worn. What a night, he mumbled, groping for the teapot as they all sat down around him. 9 wraiths, 9! And an old Mulligus Fletcher tried to put a hex on me when I had my back turned. Mr. Weasley took a long gulp of tea and sighed. Find anything, Dad? Said Fred eagerly. All I got were a few shrieking door keys and a biting kettle, yawned Mr. Weasley. There was some pretty nasty stuff that was in my department, though. Mortlake was taken away for questioning about some extremely old ferrets. But that's the Committee on Experimental Charms, thank goodness. Why would anyone bother making door keys chink? Said George. Just muggle baiting, sighed Mr. Weasley. So the Makitas keep shrinking to nothing so they can never find it when they need it. Of course, it's very hard to convict anyone because no muggle would admit their keys keep shrinking. They'll insist they just keep losing it. Bless them. They'll go to any lengths for ignoring magic, even if it's staring them in the face. But things our lot have taken enchanting, you wouldn't believe. Like cars, for instance? Mrs. Weasley had appeared, holding a long poker-like sword. Mr. Weasley's eye jerked open. He stared guiltily at his wife. Cars, Molly dear? Yes, Otter, cars, said Mrs. Weasley, her eyes flashing. Imagine a wizard buying a rusty old car and telling his wife all he wanted to do was to get apart to see how it worked, when he really went enchanting to make it fly. แล้วหนูจะจมทำไมลูก Mr. Weasley blinked. Well, dear, I think you'll find that he would be quite within the law to do that, even if he maybe would have done better to tell his wife the truth. There's a loophole in the law, you'll find, as long as he wasn't intending to fly the car. The fact that the car could fly wouldn't. Arthur Weasley, you made sure there was a loophole when you wrote that law, shouted Mrs. Weasley, just so you could carry on tinkering all the muggle rubbish in your shed. And for your information, Harry arrived this morning in the car you weren't intending to fly. Harry? Said Mr. Weasley blankly. Harry who? He looked around, saw Harry and jumped. Good Lord, is it Harry Potter? I'm very pleased to meet you. Ron's told so much about your sons flew that car to Harry's house and back last night, shouted Mrs. Weasley. What have you got to say about that, huh? Did you really? Said Mr. Weasley eagerly. Did it go all right? I mean, he faltered. A spark flew from Mrs. Weasley's eye. That was very wrong, boys. Very wrong indeed. Let's leave them to it, Ron muttered to Harry as Mrs. Weasley swelled like a bullfrog. Come on, I'll show you my bedroom. They slipped out the kitchen and down a narrow passageway to an uneven staircase which zigzagged its way up the house. On the third landing, the door stood ajar. Harry just caught sight of a pair of brown eyes staring at him before it closed with a snap. Ginny, said Ron, you don't know how great it is for her to be this shy. She never shuts up normally. They climbed 2 more flights until they reached a door with peeling paint and a small plaque on it, saying Ronald's room. Harry stepped in, his heart almost touching the sloping ceiling, and blinked. It was walking into a furnace. Nearly everything in Ron's room seemed to be a violent shade of orange. The bedspread, the walls, even the ceiling. Then Harry realized that Ron had covered nearly every inch of the shabby wallpaper with posters of the same 7 witches and wizards, all wearing bright orange robes, carrying broomstick and waving energetically. Your Quidditch team? Said Harry. The Charlie Cannons, said Ron, pointing at the orange bedspread, which was assembled into giant black seas. Then speeding cannonball, 9th in the league. Ron's school spellbook were stacked untidily in a corner, next to a pile of comics which all seemed to feature the adventure of Morden Mix, the Mad Muggle. Ron's magical wand was lying on top of a fish tank full of frog spawn on the window sill, next to his fat grey rat Scabbers, who was snoozing in a patch of sun. Harry stepped over a pack of shuffling playing cards on the floor and looked out the tiny window. In the field far below he could see a gang of gnomes sneaking one by one back through the Weasley's hedge. Then he turned to look at Ron, who was watching him almost nervously, as though waiting for his opinion. It's a bit small, said Ron quickly. Not like that room you have with the muggles, and I'm right underneath the ghoul in the attic. He's always banging on the pipes and groaning. But Harry, grinning widely, said, This is the best house I ever been in. Ron's ear went pink. แล้วก็จบแล้วนะคะสำหรับchapter ที่ 3 ของเรานะคะก็ chapter ที่ 3 เนี่ยก็จะพูดถึงว่าหลังจากที่รอนเนี่ยมาโผล่ตรงหน้าต่างของแฮร์รี่ใช่ไหมรอนเนี่ยก็คือนั่งรถที่บินได้มากับแฝดพี่กับของเขาก็คือเฟร็ดกับจอห์นก็มาเพื่อพาแฮร์รี่ไปนี่แหละแล้วตอนแรกเนี่ยก็จะขนของไปหมดแล้วแต่ดันลืมแฮร์รี่เนี่ยดันลืมนกฮูกของเขาก็คือเฮดวิกไว้ทำให้เฮดวิกเนี่ยร้องเสียงดังจนก่อนจะไปหยิบมาได้เนี่ยลุงวอนนั่นคือดูแล้วก็พยายามจะหยุดยั้งแฮร์รี่ไว้สุดท้ายก็คือหยุดยั้งแฮร์รี่ไม่ได้แฮร์รี่ก็คือขึ้นรถไปอยู่ดีแล้วก็เลยเล่ากันว่ามันเกิดเหตุการณ์อะไรขึ้นว่าอีด็อบบี้มันมาขัดขวางประมาณนั้นใช่ไหมหลายๆอย่างก็เกิดขึ้นพอทั้ง4คนเนี่ยขับรถลอยได้ไปถึงบ้านพงกระต่ายซึ่งเป็นบ้านของตระกูลวีสลีย์ใช่ไหมก็มีความแบบว่าพยายามจะแบบพยายามจะแบบว่าค่อยๆไปไม่ให้แม่รู้ตัวใช่ไหมแต่สื่อคือแม่ก็รู้อยู่ดีคำตลกคือมอลลี่อ่ะคือชีดูเหมือนมีความรักแฮร์รี่มากกว่าลูกตัวเองอ่ะคือเป็นลูกตัวเองเนี่ยด่าแต่แฮร์รี่ก็บอกว่าพอเจอแฮร์รี่ก็บอกอุ้ยแฮร์รี่เธอเป็นอะไรหรือเปล่าฉันเป็นห่วงเธอมากเลยอย่างเงี้ยแต่ลูกตัวเองคือด่าฉ่ำมากรักลูกไม่เท่าแม่งลูกอันนี้ลูกใครไม่รู้แม่งรักกว่าลูกตัวเองนะอีเจนี่นะ ประมาณนั้นเนาะแล้วก็ได้มีการแฮร์รี่เนี่ยก็แบบว่าได้เห็นวิธีการสาธิตการกำจัดโนมในสวนนะก็คือฮาร์ดคอร์เหมือนกันจับโนมแล้วก็เหวี่ยงไปอากาศประมาณนั้นนะแล้วก็บทเนี่ยก็จบได้ที่ว่าแฮร์รี่เนี่ยก็ได้เจอกับอาร์เธอร์วีสลีย์ซึ่งก็คือเป็นพ่อของรอนนี่แหละนะแล้วก็แบบว่าเกิดเรื่องอะไรขึ้นมากมายว่ารถลอยฟ้ารถบินได้นั่นคือมันเป็นของที่พ่อของที่อาร์เธอร์เหมือนเอามาเหมือนว่าหลอกเมียตัวเองว่าเอามาแยกชิ้นส่วนแต่จริงๆคือเอามาทำให้บินได้แหละแล้วเมียก็โกรธประมาณนั้นนะสุดท้ายเนี่ยแฮร์รี่ก็ได้ไปดูในห้องนอนของรอนแล้วก็เจออะไรมากมายก็แบบแบบว่าห้องนอนนี้ดีจังเลยอะไรเงี้ยจนรอนแบบว่าประมาณนั้นนะก็ถือว่าจบแล้วนะคะสำหรับวันนี้เนาะก็คือความที่3บทแรกมันค่อนข้างที่จะน้อยไงมันก็เลยจบเร็วแต่ฉันไม่อ่านเพิ่มแล้วแหละเพราะว่าฉันรู้สึกว่าเสียงฉันมันไปแล้วจริงนะก็ถือว่าวันนี้ก็พอแค่นี้แล้วกันเนาะแล้วพบกันใหม่นะคะบ๊ายบาย ฝันดีคุณพรีเมียมนะคะรู้สึกวันนี้ค่อนข้างจะเงียบเหงาวันนี้เงียบเหงามากเลยอะเดี๋ยวฉันต้องไปคิดอีกว่าวีคหน้าจะสตรีมอะไรบ้างนะจะคิดว่ายังไงก็วีคหน้าก็น่าจะมีเทลรันเนอร์แน่ๆแหละมีไมค์คราฟต่ออยู่แล้วแล้วก็อาจจะมีคอมแบทอารีนากลับมานะต้องดูว่าฉันจะปักไว้